Ladies, gentlemen, and wicked of all ages, with early access for No Rest for the Wicked beginning literally an hour before the release of this video, I figure there's one question people are going to find themselves asking very quickly early on. Because thanks to the team behind the game, I was given advanced access to the first stretch of the game, where I spent a number of hours just sort of fighting everything there was to fight, looting everything to loot, and exploring every corner that I possibly could find in that early section. So with that genuine hands-on experience that I've had under my belt, let's talk about how to become more powerful in this game as quickly as you can, because at least when I played pre-early access, it was brutal. It will kill you without mercy. So there are a few things that you can do, learn, and just understand as you go into it to make it far less so and get your mindset in the right location for the start of the game. First things first then, for anyone jumping into this just expecting a standard sort of stat-based ARPG experience, like a Diablo game for example, you need to adjust your expectations a bit. This game has that sort of overarching identity to it, yes, it is a looter dungeon crawler type of game, with an endgame heavily based around RNG, stat-based items and items with unique powers that can completely change how you play, with the goal being an enjoyable infinite endgame loop for people who enjoy the gameplay style, though that loop isn't fully in place quite yet in early access of course. That said, the main thing that you'll realize very quickly is that the combat itself in the game is very involved. It wants your attention, your focus, and it wants you to play defensively. Enemies have combos, every enemy type has their own patterns that you can learn, and if they do hit you, they do a substantial amount of damage. Thankfully, you have two main ways, at least in the early game, to deal with this. The first, which you will always have, is dodging. Dodging has iframes, which makes you immune to damage during the animation, which you can use to just avoid attacks entirely. As well, there are shields that you can use to block at the cost of stamina, but you can also just parry if you time a button press perfectly on an incoming attack to both negate the damage incoming and give you an opening to counter-attack the enemy at the same time. All of that is much more reminiscent of a Souls-like game than a standard ARPG, so it sort of just overlaps and creates a much less stagnant concept of a game. The game cannot be explained with a single comparison to another game. It is a mix of multiple subgenres of RPG, then layered on top of each other in interesting ways. So you don't just want to shove your face into it, let it wash over you and try to understand what it wants you to do and actually engage with it properly. With that out of the way then, let's start getting more specific. Big thing I can say first, I recommend heavily that you use a controller when playing the game if you have the option to. You don't have to, absolutely, but if you have access to one, I would say that you should at least try it out that way for a bit, because the game was just designed with controller in mind in the first place as the main method of controls, so of course the controls are just friendlier in that style. The next thing then is to just take things slowly in combat itself. A big important, constantly looming aspect of the game is the stamina bar. This stops you from spamming out attacks too much, because then if you do, you won't have stamina left for defensive actions at the end of your combo. The idea is to create more of a back and forth flowing style of combat, but the result is if you don't watch your stamina bar, you will just have a bad time. So always keep an eye on it, and especially early on, play it a bit safe on stamina usage until you get used to the timings of things a little bit better. On a somewhat similar note then, there are environmental things that can affect combat in some areas as well, and there are often multiple ways to enter the same room. Sometimes barging through the front door is less effective than sneaking in the rear, to put it simply. So always consider how you approach an encounter as well, as it can change the results. And related to that, think the same way of the world and map as a whole. There's an absolute ton of exploration that you can do in this world. Even basic things like a shovel and a pickaxe are tools you'll carry for your entire journey. They'll let you interact with ore nodes or hidden treasures. You can find these tools just through exploration of the opening area, but you can also miss these if you don't explore enough, and if you miss them early on, you can miss out on quite a bit of loot until you're able to find replacements, so definitely don't rush too much or you'll just miss this stuff. But also, you can choose your own approach to map progression, is what I mean here. For example, who is to say rather than going through the process of getting a key to unlock a door to find another key for another door, you can't just jump off of the back of the opening castle into the drained moat at the bottom and then just find a ladder around the back to skip the massive section and just not do the castle entirely. I'm not saying I advise doing that, but I'm saying keep in mind that you can do this type of thing. If you get stuck somewhere, there may well be a way around it for the time being to try and gain power in another way, and then you can come back. Just like generic loot around the place. A lot of the loot in the game is actually randomized, of course, being the style of game that it is, but it helps to go into this game with an understanding of what that loot really is. White items are commons, which allow you to customize them more in later game sections to be more of what you want, but their potential power is lower than a well-rolled blue item, which is a rare. These offer higher value positive enchantments and have no potential for negative enchantments, but less personalization. Then there are also purple items, which are cursed items. These have even stronger positive enchantments on them than rares do, but also come with one negative enchantment as well, so you have to be careful and weigh the value of the positives versus the now negative option too. Then finally there are gold items, which are uniques. These drop with specific sets of enchantments enchantments that are preset by the developers. These are the equivalents of your legendaries or uniques in other ARPGs, special items with specific purposes meant to be more central linchpins of your setup. Some other just sort of generic tips then: you can crouch in the game, which actually will make you enter a sort of stealth mode where you are actually pretty much nearly fully silent, so you can just sneak around enemies for a better vantage point, or even just to avoid a fight entirely if you don't really want to take it. Or you can be sneaky in another way related to that, because there are also free crits you can get in this game for going behind enemies, which lets you go backstab fishing on slower humanoid enemies, just trying to get behind them repeatedly and then stab it at the back. On top of which, behind them is of course just the defensively strongest position too against a humanoid enemy. I mean, think about the way that your own arms work as a human. Where's the hardest place for you to reach? Directly behind you. So if you're ever struggling with any kind of humanoid enemy, just try running around for a bit, staying behind them to try and score free crits as much as you can. There's also food, which you can cook at fire pits, and this is an important mechanic, as these are your only method of in-combat health regen, at least in the early game, though each food has its own cooldown after use as well, so you can only regenerate a set amount per combat you are in unless you really drag it out, defensively speaking, and make it take a long time. Then of course the next big thing is just spend your skill points. When you level up in this game, you get skill points. They don't spend automatically, so you have to do it yourself, so this is just a quick reminder of that, just in case anyone wasn't doing it. Finally then, just some tips for the first boss in case anyone gets stuck there. He's weak to fire, and you can get yourself a lovely fire weapon buff consumable before you get to fight him. Secondarily, while he can't be backstabbed, he does have a relatively easily learnable parry timing on a lot of his attacks. Parry attacks, and you won't take damage. Parry attacks enough, and you'll get to send a ton of damage back at him. Get good at parrying, and this boss will be easy as hell. Honestly, get good at parrying, and the majority of the game will become far easier than it would be otherwise. So really, this point just boils down to, well, parrying good, learn parrying soon. And that just about does it for now then, everyone. Just a sort of opening guide to how to get stronger faster in the opening sections of No Rest for the Wicked, new game just released into early access an hour ago. And hopefully this helps out anyone who was surprised by the difficulty that they found when they first hopped into the game for this first time. It can be exceedingly challenging if you're not ready for it, but it's also a really satisfying kind of challenging if you actually respect it and play into it, learn the mechanics, and play around them. So I'm really, at least personally, looking forward to pushing past the section of the game that I have already played here, which actually I'm pretty much just going to go do right now. So I hope this has helped all of you out for your first few hours of gameplay, and hopefully it will help you increase your enjoyment of the game as a whole. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.